Close your eyes now, and let your mind begin to drift. Let the concerns of the modern world, with its bustling cities and endless streams of information, gently fade into the background. We are about to embark on a journey, a voyage not across space, but across the vast and profound expanse of time. We are traveling back, far beyond the reach of written history, beyond the rise and fall of empires whose names we know, beyond the very foundations of the first villages. We are journeying to a time when the world was a profoundly different place, a time of deep, ancient silence and of nature's unending whisper. We are going back to the world of 10,000 years before the Common Era, to a pivotal moment on the very cusp of change, to understand what life was like for humanity before the first cities were ever dreamed of. This is a world untouched by the hum of machinery, unmarked by the plow, and unscarred by the stone and brick of permanent settlement. The air is cleaner, sharper, carrying scents we can scarcely imagine today, the crisp aroma of untouched pine forests, the rich, damp smell of peat bogs, the dry, dusty fragrance of grasslands stretching to the horizon. At night, the sky is a breathtaking, overwhelming tapestry of stars, undimmed by a single point of artificial light, a brilliant river of silver flowing through the darkness. The only sounds that break the silence are the sounds of the earth itself, the wind sighing through endless plains, the distant howl of a wolf, the crackle of a carefully tended fire, and the soft murmuring voices of people, living in intimate, constant dialogue with the world around them. This period, roughly 12,000 years ago, marks the end of a long and brutal chapter in human history. The last ice age, the great glaciers that once sprawled across continents, locking up vast quantities of the world's water, are in a steady, relentless retreat. They are withdrawing, melting, carving new landscapes in their wake. This melting is causing sea levels to rise, slowly drowning coastlines that once were home to human communities and creating new ones. Land bridges that once connected continents are vanishing beneath the waves, isolating populations of humans, animals, and plants, forever changing the course of biological and cultural history. The world is literally reshaping itself, and humanity, a resilient and adaptable species, is learning to navigate this new, changing world. The people of this time are not primitive. They are us. They possess the same intellect, the same capacity for love, fear, joy, and ingenuity that we do. Their knowledge is simply of a different world. Their minds are vast libraries of practical survival, filled with an intimate understanding of animal behavior, plant cycles, weather patterns, and stoneworking. They are masters of their environment, not through domination, but through profound observation and integration. They live in small, mobile bands, extended families woven together by kinship and shared experience. Moving across territories they know with an intimacy we reserve for our own hometowns. Their story is not one of struggle against nature, but of life within it, a delicate and sophisticated dance of survival and meaning. In this narrative, we will walk alongside these our ancestors. We will witness their daily routines, their monumental artistic achievements, their spiritual beliefs, and their social structures. We will explore how they found their food, how they made their tools, how they sheltered from the elements, and how they expressed their deepest hopes and fears. We will see the first tentative steps toward a new way of life, the cultivation of plants, and the domestication of animals that will, over millennia, culminate in the birth of agriculture and, eventually, the first cities. But for now, in this moment of 10,000 BCE, that future is a distant, unimaginable horizon. The world is still wild, and humanity is still a part of that wilderness. So, settle in. Let your breathing become slow and steady. Imagine the warmth of a campfire on your skin, the smell of wood smoke in the air, the feel of a soft hand-worked hide wrapped around your shoulders. Listen for the sounds of the ancient night. We are about to step into a world long lost to time, to understand the foundations upon which our entire modern existence was built. This is the story of dawn, the quiet, vibrant world before the sunrise of civilization. To understand the lives of the people of 10,000 BCE, we must first understand the stage upon which they lived, a world still trembling from the retreat of the ice. The epoch we know as the Pleistocene was giving way to the Holocene, our current geological era. This was not a gentle transition, but a dramatic and often turbulent reshaping of the entire planet. The single greatest force governing human life was not a king or a chieftain, but the immense, grinding power of ice. For tens of thousands of years, Colossal ice sheets, miles thick in places, had covered vast swathes of North America, Northern Europe, and Asia. This was a world of stark extremes, of frigid steppes and contracted ecosystems. But as the climate warmed, these monstrous glaciers began to melt. Their retreat was not a steady, gentle thaw, but a series of fits and starts, with periods of rapid melting followed by sudden, cruel returns of the cold. This process dictated every aspect of existence, presenting both immense challenges and unprecedented opportunities for the small bands of hunter-gatherers who populated the earth. The most immediate and visible change was in the very geography of the world. As the glaciers melted, they released unimaginable volumes of water back into the oceans. Sea levels were rising at a rate that would be catastrophic for modern civilization, inundating coastal plains and river valleys that had been home to humans and animals for millennia. What we now call Doggerland, a rich and habitable landscape connecting Britain to mainland Europe, was slowly being swallowed by the North Sea. Similarly, vast stretches of coastline around the world were disappearing forever, their stories and settlements lost beneath the waves, creating new seas and isolating landmasses. The land itself, freed from the immense weight of the ice, was rebounding, rising up in a process known as isostatic rebound. This created new lakes, altered river courses, and exposed fresh, mineral-rich soils for plants to colonize. The meltwater from the glaciers carved huge new river valleys and filled massive basins, creating lakes where none had existed before. The landscape was dynamic and unstable, a place of constant change where a familiar foraging ground could be transformed by a landslide or a flood within a single season. This physical transformation drove a biological revolution. The cold-adapted megafauna, the iconic giants of the Ice Age, were in decline. The mammoths, the woolly rhinoceroses, the giant elk with their staggering antlers, and the cave lions were finding their specialized world shrinking. Their vast grazing pastures, the mammoth steppe, were being replaced by denser forests of birch, pine, and later, oak and elm. This change in vegetation supported different, often smaller, and more elusive game. Red deer, roe deer, wild boar, and aurochster, massive, wild ancestors of modern cattle. For humanity, this shifting world was a double-edged sword. The loss of the great mammoth herds, a cornerstone of survival for many cultures, must have been a profound cultural and practical catastrophe. The rituals, the hunting strategies, the tools, and the very stories that had been built around these magnificent creatures for generations were becoming obsolete. Yet the new forests and rising seas offered new abundance. Wetlands teemed with waterfowl, fish, and aquatic plants. Forests provided nuts, berries, fungi, and a different kind of prey. The coastline, though changing, offered rich harvests of shellfish, seals, and fish. The climate itself was a fickle master. While the overall trend was toward warming, it was a rocky path. There were sudden, severe cold snaps, like the Younger Dryas period that had only recently ended, which brought near glacial conditions back to the northern hemisphere for over 1,000 years. This volatility meant that adaptability was not just a useful skill, it was the key to survival. A band that could shift its hunting techniques, learn new plant lore, and move its territory at a moment's notice was a band that would thrive. This, then, was the great stage of 10,000 BCE, a world in flux, raw, fresh, and filled with both danger and possibility. The melting ice had written the first act of this new age, and humanity, resilient and observant, was learning its new lines. They were not passive victims of this change, but active participants, their choices and innovations subtly influencing the ecosystems around them. They were watching the old world die and a new one be born, and they were preparing to step into a role that would, eventually, change everything. They were on the verge of learning how to not just live in their world, but to actively shape it. Across this vast, reshaped world, humanity was not a monolithic entity, but a rich and diverse tapestry of cultures, languages, and ways of life. The total human population at this time was sparse, perhaps only 5 million souls scattered across the entire globe. To put that number into perspective, it is less than the modern population of many of the world's great cities. These people were organized into small, mobile bands, likely consisting of 20 to 50 individuals, all connected by intricate and essential bonds of kinship. Imagine for a moment the social world of an individual within such a band. Your entire universe, your sense of safety, identity, and purpose is intertwined with this small group of people. You know every face, every voice, every strength, and every weakness. There are no strangers. The band is your family, in the broadest and most profound sense. It includes not just your parents and siblings, but your cousins, your grandparents, your in-laws, and your children. Survival itself depends on absolute cooperation and unwavering trust. There is no room for selfishness. The success of the hunt, the gathering of sufficient roots and berries, the defense against predators all hinge on the group acting as a single, cohesive unit. Leadership in such groups was typically fluid and situational. There was no chief, no king, no permanent ruler. Instead, authority was earned and granted based on knowledge, skill, and experience. The best hunter might lead the tracking party. The most knowledgeable elder, whose memory held the locations of waterholes during a drought or the medicinal properties of a rare plant, would guide the band's movements in times of scarcity. A person with a particular talent for resolving conflicts might act as a mediator in disputes. This was a form of egalitarianism born of necessity. While status certainly existed, respect was given to skilled providers, wise elders, and spiritually adept individuals. It was not hereditary or rigid. The group's survival was the highest law, and leadership went to whoever was best equipped to serve that law in any given moment. The division of labor was likely based on a combination of physicality, knowledge, and circumstance, not the rigid gender roles often imagined. While it is broadly evidenced that much of big game hunting was often, though not exclusively, undertaken by men, this was not a hard rule. The gathering of plant foods, shellfish, small game, and insects which consistently provided the majority of the band's daily nutrition was a complex and skilled activity, often undertaken by women who needed an encyclopedic knowledge of botany, seasonality, and toxicology. But these roles were not prisons. Everyone would have been capable of performing essential tasks. The entire band would work together to process a large kill, construct a shelter, or care for children. And the children, they were not separate from this life. From their earliest days, they were woven into the fabric of daily subsistence. They learned by doing, by watching, by playing with miniature tools. A child would accompany their mother gathering tubers, learning to identify the right plants by their leaf shape and to avoid the poisonous ones. They would listen to the hunters recount the story of a pursuit, learning the behaviors of the prey, the lay of the land, the strategies of the hunt. Education was continuous, practical, and immersive. There were no schools because the entire world was their classroom, and every adult was a teacher. Social life was rich and complex. Language was fully developed, capable of conveying intricate ideas, past events, and future plans. Evenings around the fire were not times of silent exhaustion, but of vital social activity. This was when knowledge was transmitted through stories, myths of creation, tales of ancestral heroes, cautionary fables about dangers in the world. It was when disputes were aired and resolved, when plans for the next day's movement or hunt were discussed, when tools were repaired, and when bonds were strengthened through conversation, laughter, and song. Beyond the immediate band, wider social networks were crucial. These small groups were not isolated islands. They were part of a larger web of kinship that connected them to other bands across a wide territory. Marriage partners were almost always found outside one's own band, creating alliances and fostering genetic diversity. There were likely regular seasonal gatherings of multiple bands at places of particular abundancy: river, teeming with salmon runs, a grove of nut trees ripe for harvesting. These gatherings were festivals of social renewal. They were times for trading rare materials like obsidian or seashells, for arranging marriages, for sharing news and innovations, for resolving intergroup conflicts, and for collective ceremonies. In a world of tiny communities, these events were the internet, the marketplace, the diplomatic summit, and the wedding hall all rolled into one. This was the social human animal of 10,000 BCE, deeply communal, profoundly knowledgeable, adaptable, and connected. Their strength lay not in individual prowess, but in the collective intelligence and cooperation of the group. They lived in a constant and intimate conversation with each other and with the world around them, a world they understood, not as a resource to be exploited, but as a relative to be known. To step into the mind of a person from 10,000 BCE is to step into a vast and intricate library of practical knowledge, where every leaf, track, and cloud formation tells a story. Theirs was not a life of constant, grim struggle, but a life of skilled and attentive engagement with an environment they knew with an intimacy we can scarcely comprehend. A typical day was a symphony of applied intelligence, a continuous process of decision-making based on deep observation and inherited wisdom. The day would begin with the first grey light of dawn. There was no concept of rushing. The rhythm was set by the sun, the seasons, and the needs of the body. The band would gather, perhaps sharing a simple morning meal of leftover food from the previous evening, some dried meat, a handful of nuts, or some roasted tubers. The primary question of the day was always the same: where do we find food and water? This decision was not made lightly. It was a council of sorts, drawing on the knowledge of all. The elders might recall that the ripening of a certain berry in a specific valley meant that the deer would be moving there to feed. A hunter might have seen tracks the day before, suggesting a herd was nearby. A woman might remember a patch of nutritious roots that should be ready to dig up. The decision on where to go and what to pursue was a collective strategic plan. Then, the band would split into smaller task groups, their activities perfectly attuned to the season and the environment. A hunting party, armed with spears tipped with finely chipped stone points, might set out. But the hunt was rarely a frantic chase. It was an exercise in extreme patience and stealth. Hunters could read the subtlest of signs: a broken twig, the freshness of droppings, the direction of the wind that could carry their scent to their prey. They understood animal behavior intimately, knowing that aurochs were aggressive and dangerous to approach. While reindeer could be startled and driven into a natural ambush, the success rate of any single hunt was low, and so the hunter's skill was measured not just in strength and speed, but in persistence and profound ecological knowledge. Meanwhile, a gathering party, often comprising women, children, and older members, would move through the landscape with a different focus. Theirs was a search for the steady, reliable calories that formed the bedrock of the diet. This was not random picking. It required a botanical expertise that dwarfed modern knowledge. They could identify hundreds of plant species, knowing exactly which parts were edible: the root of this plant, the young shoots of that one, the nut from this tree only after leaching its tannins in water. They knew the precise time to harvest. A week too early and the tuber would be small and starchy. A week too late and it would be tough and bitter. They carried digging sticks to unearth roots and baskets, likely woven from reeds or grasses, to carry their harvest. This knowledge was the community's insurance policy against the unpredictability of the hunt. Other tasks filled the day. Water was a constant need, and knowing the location of fresh springs and streams was vital. Tool-making was a continuous process. Someone might sit down to nap a new spear point from a core of flint or obsidian, striking it with a soft hammer of antler to produce razor-sharp flakes and a perfectly shaped tool. This was a high-skill craft, passed down through generations, and the sound of stone striking stone was a familiar melody in the campsite. Hides from previous hunts needed to be scraped clean of fat and flesh, then softened by working them by hand or with bone tools, perhaps smoking them to preserve them. Children would be involved in all of this, playing at first, then gradually taking on more responsibility, their small hands learning the motions that meant survival. The camp itself was a temporary home, a reflection of their mobile life. In forested areas, shelters might be simple lean-tos of branches and bark, oriented against the prevailing wind. On open plains, they might erect tents of animal hides, stretched over a frame of mammoth tusks or wooden poles. In favorable rock shelters or caves, they would simply occupy the space, building their fires near the entrance. The hearth was the absolute center of this domestic life. It provided warmth against the chill of night. It was the place where food was cooked, roasting meat, boiling water in containers made of skin or bark using heated stones, baking dough in the ashes. The fire was protection, keeping predators at bay with its flickering light and crackling sound. And it was the social heart, the place where the band reunited at the end of the day. As the sun began to set, the task groups would return to the camp. The success of the hunt was cause for celebration and intense, cooperative work. A large kill meant everyone would work together to butcher the animal, preserving what could not be immediately eaten by drying thin strips of meat over the fire. The gathered foods, nuts, berries, greens, roots would be shared and prepared. The evening meal was a time of satisfaction and community. As darkness enveloped the world, the circle of firelight would become their entire universe, a tiny island of warmth, food, and kinship in the immense, whispering darkness of the prehistoric night. This was the daily rhythm of life, a rhythm of skilled procurement, shared labor, and profound connection to the immediate, life-sustaining world. To the modern eye, the world of 10,000 BCE might seem technologically barren. There was no metal, no pottery, no writing. But this view misunderstands the sophistication of the technology that did exist. The toolkit of these late Paleolithic people was a masterpiece of adaptation, a testament to human ingenuity in harnessing the materials the natural world provided. Every tool was an extension of the body and the mind, perfectly designed for its specific task, and each was the product of a deep, intimate knowledge of material properties. The undisputed king of this technological world was stone, but not just any stone. The people of this era were geologists, understanding the fracture properties of different types of rock. They sought out fine-grained glassy materials like flint, chert, and obsidian because they could be knapped precisely fractured to produce edges that were sharper than a modern surgical scalpel. The process of making a stone tool was not one of brute force, but of delicate, calculated percussion. A skilled napper would hold a core of flint in one hand and strike its edge with a hammerstone of a harder rock to detach large flakes. For more refined work, they used a softer hammer of antler or bone, applying pressure to shape the tool with incredible control. The results were diverse and specialized. There were large bifacial spear points, carefully thinned and shaped to be hafted onto a wooden shaft with sinew and resinous glue. There were smaller, razor-sharp projectile points for arrows, a technology that was becoming increasingly widespread and revolutionary. There were scrapers of every shape and size, with a strong beveled edge perfect for defleshing hides and preparing them for use. There were burins with a chisel-like point for working bone and antler. There were awls for piercing, and every time a core was napped, it produced a shower of smaller flakes, the disposable utility blades of the Stone Age. These flakes could be used for a few minutes to cut meat, scrape a hide, or whittle wood, and then discarded. A campsite was littered with these tiny fragments of daily activity. But technology was far more than just stone. The organic materials they used, wood, bone, antler, fiber, and hide, were just as, if not more, important, though they survive far less frequently in the archaeological record. Wood was engineering material. It was used to make spears, digging sticks, throwing sticks, and the shafts for tools. It was likely used to construct traps and snares for catching smaller game. It was the fuel for the life-giving fire. Bone and antler were the plastics of the Paleolithic, strong, durable, and carvable. From these materials, people crafted needles with finely drilled eyes, essential for sewing fitted clothing from hides. They made barbed points for fishing harpoons. They created awls, punches, and intricate ornaments. They fashioned hooks for fishing. The development of the eyed needle was a particular revolution, allowing for the sewing of tight, weatherproof seams that enabled people to survive in colder climates. Perhaps the most overlooked technology is that of fiber and textiles. While weaving on looms was still in the future, people knew how to twist and spin plant fibers, sinew, and animal hair into cordage and thread. This string was vital. It was used to haft stone points to shafts, to weave nets for catching fish, birds, and small rabbits, to set snares, and to create carrying bags. The invention of the net represented a shift in thinking. It was a passive technology that worked while the people slept or attended to other tasks, greatly increasing the efficiency of food procurement. And then there was the technology of containment. Without pottery, people were still masters of holding things. They wove baskets from reeds and grasses. They carved bowls from wood. They used animal bladders, stomachs, and specially prepared pieces of hide as water skins and containers. They likely used bark containers as well. To boil water or cook stews, they couldn't place a hide pot directly on the fire. Instead, they used a technique known as stone boiling. They would heat small stones in the heart of a fire. Then, using wooden tongs, transfer these red-hot stones to a hide or bark container filled with water and food. The stones would heat the water to boiling, cooking the contents without burning the container. This entire technological suite was not static. It was constantly evolving, with innovations spreading slowly along the vast social networks that connected bands. A new, more efficient style of projectile point developed in one region might, over generations, be adopted hundreds of miles away. This technology was lightweight, repairable, and made from locally available materials the perfect expression of a mobile lifestyle. It was a technology of elegance and efficiency, born from a deep and respectful dialogue between human intelligence and the material world. It was all they needed to not just survive, but to thrive and paint the first masterpieces of human culture. The world of our ancestors was not merely a physical landscape of resources and dangers. It was a deeply animate and spiritual place, imbued with meaning, presence, and power that extended far beyond what was immediately visible. For the people of 10,000 BCE, the boundary between the natural and the supernatural was fluid and permeable. Every mountain, river, animal, and tree could possess a spirit, a consciousness, or an essence that demanded respect, negotiation, and reverence. Their spirituality was not a separate part of life. It was woven into the very fabric of daily existence, informing every hunt, every harvest, and every social interaction. It is likely that their belief systems were forms of animism and shamanism. Animism, from the Latin anima meaning soul or breath, is the belief that spirit exists not only in humans but in all things animals, plants, rocks, weather patterns, and even geographical features. A successful hunt was not just a matter of skill and luck. It was a transaction. The animal had offered itself to the hunter, and in return, the hunter and his people owed the animal's spirit, respect, and gratitude. This gratitude was shown through rituals. The bones of a revered animal, like a bear or a mammoth, might be carefully arranged or buried, a practice seen in archaeological sites, perhaps to ensure its spirit would be reborn and allow itself to be hunted again. To waste any part of such a gift would be a profound sacrilege, potentially angering the spirits and bringing misfortune upon the band. Working within this animistic framework was the figure of the shaman, a part-time religious practitioner who acted as an intermediary between the world of the living and the world of the spirits. The shaman was not a priest in a temple. He or she was a member of the band who possessed a unique sensitivity or aptitude for navigating the unseen realms. Through techniques like rhythmic drumming, dancing, chanting, or the use of psychoactive plants, the shaman would enter a trance state, a controlled journey out of the body. In this state, they might travel to the spirit world to ask for guidance, to discover the cause of an illness, to ensure the success of an upcoming hunt, or to retrieve a lost soul. The shaman's role was intensely practical. If a band member fell ill, the cause was not seen as a virus or bacteria, but as a spiritual imbalance, perhaps a loss of soul, an offending spirit, or a broken taboo. The shaman's job was to diagnose and rectify this spiritual ailment. If game was scarce, the shaman might journey to the master or mistress of the animals, a powerful spirit believed to govern the herds, to plead for their return. Their knowledge of herbal remedies and human psychology, combined with their deep belief in their spiritual power, made them the doctors, therapists, and spiritual guides of their community. This rich inner life found magnificent expression in art. The cave paintings of Lascaux, Altamira, and Chauviet, though created millennia before our focus of 10,000 BCE, are the stunning culmination of this spiritual worldview. But this tradition of expression continued. People created. They painted and engraved stones in open-air shelters. They carved intricate figures from ivory, bone, and antler. These were not mere decorations. They were powerful objects charged with meaning. The most common subjects were the animals they depended upon and revered: bison, horses, deer, and mighty aurochs. These images were likely more than simple depictions. Many are painted deep inside caves, in areas of profound darkness and silence, reached only by a perilous journey. Painting them may have been a ritual act, a way to capture the essence of the animal, to exert a form of spiritual control over it, or to honor its spirit, to ensure hunting success. The animals are often painted with astonishing realism and vitality, their muscles rippling, their bodies in motion, as if the artist was seeking to capture not just the form, but the very life force of the creature. Alongside the animals, there were abstract signs, dots, lines, hand stencils, and strange geometric patterns. The meaning of these signs is lost to us, but they likely held potent symbolic significance, perhaps mapping the spirit journey of a shaman or representing spiritual concepts. Personal adornment also spoke of a world of meaning and social connection. Beads made from shell, animal teeth, ivory, and colored stone were painstakingly drilled and strung into necklaces, bracelets, and adornments for clothing. Ochre, a red earthy pigment, was used to paint bodies for ceremonies, and perhaps for everyday protection from the sun and insects. These were not frivolous vanities. They signaled identity, status, group affiliation, and perhaps spiritual protection. A necklace of bear teeth might proclaim a hunter's prowess and connection to the spirit of the bear. A shell from a distant ocean, traded over hundreds of miles, might be a powerful talisman and a symbol of a far-reaching social network. This spiritual worldview provided a framework for understanding the universe and humanity's place within it. It offered explanations for the unexplainableness, death, drought, and abundance. It provided comfort in a dangerous world and codified a system of ethics that promoted respect for the environment and social cohesion. It was a world alive with meaning, where every sunrise, every animal encounter, and every rustle of the leaves was part of an ongoing, sacred conversation. Beyond the immediate needs of survival and the rituals of the spirit world, the people of 10,000 BCE possessed a powerful and irrepressible drive to create, to symbolize, and to beautify their existence. This artistic impulse is one of the most profound testaments to their humanity, revealing minds that were not only practical, but contemplative, imaginative, and deeply connected to the world through aesthetics. Their art was not a leisure activity. It was an integral part of their being, a language without words that communicated their deepest understandings of life, the world, and their place within it. The most breathtaking remnants of this creativity are the magnificent paintings that adorn the deep, hidden chambers of caves across Europe, such as the recently discovered Chauvet cave in France. While the apex of this tradition was earlier, its spirit absolutely persisted into our period. To enter such a cave was to leave the ordinary world behind. The journey itself was a ritual crawling through narrow passages, descending into absolute darkness, guided only by the flickering light of animal fat lamps made of stone. The darkness was total, the silence profound, broken only by the drip of water and the crackle of the lamp. In this otherworldly setting, they created their masterpieces, using charcoal, ochre, and manganese dioxide for blacks, reds, yellows, and browns. They painted with stunning skill. The animals on the walls: bison, horses, mammoths, lions, and rhinos are not static portraits. They are dynamic, bursting with life. Artists used the natural contours of the rock wall to give volume to a bison's shoulder or the curve of a horse's belly. They depicted herds, movement, and even narrative scenes. The effect in the flickering lamplight would have been magical. The animals seeming to breathe and move, a powerful illusion that surely served a powerful spiritual or ceremonial purpose. This was not art for a gallery. It was art for the spirits, for the shaman's journey, for ensuring the continuation of the herds upon which life depended. But art was not confined to the deep caves. It was a part of daily life. People carved small, portable objects from reindeer, antler, mammoth ivory, and soft stone. They created voluptuous female figurines, like the famous Venus figurines found across Europe, with their exaggerated breasts, bellies, and hips. These were likely symbols of fertility, abundance, and the life-giving forces of nature, perhaps carried as amulets or used in rituals related to childbirth and the continuity of the band. They also carved animals with the same exquisite attention to detail. Mammoth expertly rendered on a piece of ivory, a bison turning its head on a spear thrower, a swimming reindeer. Their artistic expression extended to their own bodies and tools. They practiced body painting, using ochre to create patterns that may have signified belonging, status, or readiness for a ceremony. They created personal ornaments that were both beautiful and meaningful. Beads were manufactured in immense numbers from a variety of materials. A single necklace might require dozens of hours of labor to drill holes through hard teeth or small shells using a stone drill, and then to polish each bead to a smooth finish. These were treasured possessions, worn and traded, each bead representing a significant investment of time and skill, marking important social connections and individual identity. Music, though it leaves no direct trace, was almost certainly a vital part of their cultural life. We can infer its presence from the discovery of probable musical instruments. Flutes, meticulously carved from the hollow bones of birds like swans or vultures, have been found at sites from this era. These instruments are capable of producing a haunting, melodic sound. There were also likely drums, made from hides stretched over a frame, and rattles. Music would have accompanied storytelling, dancing, and ceremonies. serving to bind the community together in shared rhythm and emotion, to induce trance states, and to celebrate. Storytelling was the living library of the band. Around the evening fire, elders would recount the epic tales of the group's mythology, how the world was created, how humans received fire, the adventures of the first ancestors, and the nature of the animal spirits. These stories were not mere entertainment. They were the vessels of history, morality, and practical knowledge. They encoded information about animal behavior, migration routes, and survival techniques within memorable narratives. They taught the young about the values of the group: cooperation, respect for elders, bravery, and reciprocity. The oral tradition was the thread that connected the past to the present and the present to the future. This rich cultural life demonstrates that these were people with a profound sense of wonder and a need to make sense of their existence through symbol and story. Their art and their culture were the tools with which they built a world of meaning, transforming their struggle for survival into a lived experience filled with beauty, ritual, and a deep abiding connection to the mystery of life. The world of 10,000 BCE was on the cusp of a revolution, though no one living then could have possibly perceived its ultimate scale. The long-standing, highly successful strategy of hunting and gathering was beginning to be subtly supplemented by new practices. These were not deliberate choices for a new way of life, but rather gradual, almost imperceptible adaptations to a changing world, and the opportunities presented by a deeper, more intimate knowledge of the environment. The first seeds of agriculture, both literal and metaphorical, were being sown. This period is known to archaeologists as the Epipaleolithic or Mesolithic in many regions, a time of transition. The great ice sheets were gone, and the climate was settling into the warmer, more stable patterns of the Holocene. This stability allowed ecosystems to flourish in new ways. Dense forests spread, and with them came new resources. But human ingenuity was also flourishing, leading to an intensification of food procurement strategies. People were not just collecting food, they were beginning to actively manage their environment to produce more of it. One of the most significant developments was the gradual move toward what is called broad-spectrum foraging or intensive gathering. As some large game animals became less abundant, people relied more heavily on a wider variety of food sources. They became experts at exploiting seasonal bounties with incredible efficiency. This required an even more detailed knowledge of the life cycles of plants and animals. They knew when the salmon would run up the rivers, when the nuts would fall from the trees, when the waterfowl would migrate, and when the shellfish were at their plumpest. They developed new technologies to harvest these resources. Sophisticated fish weirs and traps built from stakes in rivers, nets for catching birds and small game, and complex strategies for communal hunting and gathering. It was within this context of intensive knowledge that the first steps toward plant cultivation emerged. For generations, gatherers had known which plants were edible and where they grew best. They likely practiced simple forms of land management, such as using fire to clear undergrowth and encourage the growth of desirable plants for both themselves and the game they hunted. The logical next step was to begin tending these plants more directly. They might have weeded around patches of wild wheat or barley to give them more space to grow. They might have deliberately scattered the seeds of their favorite plants near their seasonal campsites. This was not farming as we know it. It was a form of casual cultivation, a helping hand offered to nature. But over time, a fascinating biological process began to occur. As humans harvested wild grasses, they naturally selected for certain traits. They would tend to harvest the stands of grain that held their seeds the longest, as the seeds that scattered easily at a touch were lost before they could be collected. By bringing these selected seeds back to camp and accidentally spilling them, or by deliberately sowing them, they were unconsciously breeding plants that were more dependent on human intervention for propagation. The genetic makeup of these plants was slowly, unknowingly, being altered. A parallel process was beginning with animals. The relationship between humans and wolves had already transformed into one of mutual benefit, giving rise to the first domesticated dogs. These animals were not just pets, they were partners. They assisted in hunting, provided warning barks, and offered warmth on cold nights. This successful partnership may have planted the idea of a closer relationship with other species. People had long understood animal behavior intimately. Now, some groups began to practice what is known as animal management. Instead of just hunting wild herds of goats, sheep, or cattle, they might have begun to control them. This could involve selectively culling herds, taking mainly males for meat while preserving a larger number of females to maintain the population. They might have corralled young animals, keeping them for a time before slaughter, a practice that would have allowed for easier access to meat and hides. Over time, and again through unconscious selection, the less aggressive, more manageable animals that thrived in closer proximity to humans would have been favored, beginning the long genetic journey from wild aurochs to domestic cow, from wild mouflon to domestic sheep. These changes were not happening everywhere, and they were not a linear, inevitable march toward farming. For many groups, the old ways remained perfectly successful. This new, more intensive relationship with certain plants and animals was simply another tool in their toolkit, a strategy to be used in certain environments under certain conditions. It allowed for a degree of predictability and a slightly more settled life, perhaps staying in one place for several months to tend a ripening stand of grains or to guard a corralled herd. This was the quiet dawn of the Neolithic Revolution. It was not a sudden invention, but a slow, co-evolutionary dance between humans and other species. It was a partnership that began with deep observation and a gentle nudge, a series of small choices that would, over millennia, accumulate into the most profound transformation in human history, forever altering our species' relationship with the planet and setting the stage for the world to come. The first farmer, patiently scattering seeds in a cleared patch of earth, was simply practicing a deeper form of what their ancestors had always done, using knowledge to secure a future for their band. The world of 10,000 BCE was vast, but it was not a world of isolated pockets of humanity. Even across immense and seemingly empty landscapes, the threads of connection stretched, weaving a subtle web of communication, exchange, and sometimes conflict. The small mobile bands were not closed circles. They were nodes in a vast, slow-moving network that transmitted not only goods but also ideas, innovations, and genes across continents. This interaction was a crucial engine of cultural dynamism and resilience. Trade and exchange were fundamental aspects of life, but they bore little resemblance to modern commerce. There was no currency, no markets in the conventional sense. Instead, exchange was based on principles of reciprocity and the building of social bonds. When bands met at seasonal gatherings, the act of giving was as important as the item given. A band that had access to high-quality flint from a particular quarry might trade finely worked core or preforms to another band from the coast, who would offer shell beads or dried fish in return. These were not merely utilitarian transactions. They were rituals that reinforced alliances, created obligations, and fostered goodwill. A gift given created a debt of reciprocity, a tie that would bind the groups together and ensure peaceful relations when their paths crossed again. The materials that moved along these ancient trade routes tell a story of both practical need and the desire for beauty and status. Obsidian, a volcanic glass that could produce the sharpest cutting edge imaginable, was traded over astonishing distances, sometimes hundreds of miles from its source. This indicates not only its high value, but also the existence of established roots and relationships of trust. Amber from northern coastlines, seashells from warm shores, and rare pigments like bright red ochre were all highly prized and found far from their points of origin. A hunter wearing a necklace of shells from a distant ocean was not just displaying wealth, he was displaying connection. He was a living testament to the reach of his band's social network and their standing among other groups. Yet, this world was not one of universal peace. Conflict was a part of the human experience. In a world where resources were directly tied to survival, competition could turn violent. A dispute over a prime hunting ground, a rich berry patch, or a reliable water source could escalate into a raid or a skirmish. The motivations were likely complex, not just resource scarcity, but also revenge for a past grievance, the abduction of individuals, or simple rivalry. The archaeological evidence for large-scale warfare is scant for this period, but evidence of violent trauma on skeletons, healed skull fractures, projectile points embedded in bone tells a quieter story of intermittent, small-scale conflict. Life was precious, and the loss of even one skilled hunter or knowledgeable gatherer could be a devastating blow to a band, likely making a lout war a costly and undesirable last resort. As this era drew to a close, around 10,000 BCE, all the elements for a monumental shift were present. Humanity possessed a deep, sophisticated knowledge of the natural world. They had developed complex social structures and far-flung networks of exchange. They were already practicing the first tentative steps of environmental management and cultivation. The climate had stabilized, creating new, abundant, ecological niches. The stage was set. In a few specific places around the globe, the Fertile Crescent of the Middle East, the river valleys of China, the highlands of New Guinea, and later in the Americas, these elements would begin to combine in a new and powerful way. The transition would be slow, taking thousands of years. For generations, the old ways and the new would exist side by side. A band might tend a plot of wild wheat, yet still rely heavily on hunting gazelle. They might keep a small herd of goats, but still move their camp with the seasons. The change was so gradual that no single generation would have felt they were living through a revolution. The child who helped her mother scatter seeds would grow into an elder who remembered when the band moved more often. But she would see the benefit of staying in one place a little longer to harvest the grain. The world of the hunter-gatherer, a way of life that had defined humanity for over 99% of its existence, was beginning to evolve. The path ahead led toward permanent settlements, toward population growth, toward specialization of labor, and toward an entirely new relationship with the land, one of ownership and control. It led to the accumulation of surplus, to wealth inequality, and to new forms of hierarchy and power. It led to the first villages, then towns, and ultimately to the first cities. But for now, in this moment of 10,000 BCE, the air is still clear of wood smoke from permanent hearths. The landscape is not yet divided by fields and fences. The profound silence of the natural world is broken only by the wind, the animals, and the soft sounds of a small group of people. Working together, living in the moment, their lives a testament to a successful and ancient rhythm. They stand on the brink of a new world, unaware that the choices they are making, the seeds they are selecting, the animals they are managing will echo down the millennia and fundamentally reshape the story of humanity. The longest chapter in human history is nearing its end, and the first page of a new one is about to be turned. As our journey back to 10,000 BCE draws to a close, we are left not with a picture of a primitive past, but with a profound sense of connection to a deep and sophisticated heritage. The world of our ancestors was one of immense knowledge, resilience, and a harmonious, though demanding, integration with the natural world. They were not waiting for civilization to begin. They were living a complete and rich human existence, one that had been perfected over hundreds of thousands of years. Their success is evidenced by the simple fact that we are here today, their descendants, carrying within us the echoes of their world. The shift away from this way of life, the transition to agriculture and settled living that began to stir in this era, was not a straightforward tale of progress. With the rise of cities would come immense achievements art, architecture, writing, and complex society. But something was also lost: the intimate, daily knowledge of the flora and fauna, the deep spiritual connection to a living world. The fluid social structures and egalitarian tendencies of the band, these would be diluted, and in many cases severed. The farmer's life, tied to a single plot of land, was often harder, more labor-intensive, and more vulnerable to famine and disease than that of the forager. The human skeleton reveals this story. With agriculture often came poorer nutrition, shorter stature, and more evidence of dietary stress. Yet, the hunter-gatherer world did not vanish entirely. It persists in the deep wiring of our own minds and bodies. The feeling of peace and clarity many of us find on a long walk in nature, the instinct to gather with friends and family around a shared meal, the deep satisfaction of creating something with our own hands, these are the whispers of that old life. Our love for storytelling, our capacity for cooperation within a close-knit group, our sharp eyes for patterns in the world around us, even our modern struggles with sedentary lifestyles and diets high in processed foods, all of these are echoes of a past for which our biology is still profoundly adapted. The people of 10,000 BCE bequeathed to us the very foundations of our humanity. They were the original explorers, the first scientists who classified the natural world, the first artists who sought meaning in form and symbol, the first theologians who pondered the unseen, and the first engineers who mastered materials. Every technological breakthrough since, from the smelting of metal to the silicon chip, rests upon the bedrock of basic knowledge they first discovered and perfected: the lever, the knot, the needle, the principle of the controlled fire. So, as you return from this journey through time, carry with you a sense of awe for this deep history. The next time you look at the night sky, undimmed by city lights, remember that your ancestors saw the same constellations and told their stories beneath them. The next time you share a meal and a story with loved ones, remember that you are participating in the oldest human ritual of all, the warmth of the hearth, the comfort of community, the thrill of the hunt. Whether for a project completed or a goal achieved, these are not metaphors, they are a deep, genetic memory. The world before the cities was not a void waiting to be filled. It was a world of profound connection, of a harmony between humanity and nature that was hard-won and beautifully maintained. It was the dawn of our species, a long, slow, and vibrant sunrise that set the stage for all that was to come. Their story is not a separate history. It is the first and longest chapter of our own. And in the quiet moments, if you listen closely, you can still hear its rhythm, like a distant drumbeat, reminding us of where we came from, and of the ancient, enduring strengths that still reside within us all. The story is told. The fire burns low. The ancient night embraces the world once more. May you carry the peace of that deep past into your dreams. Rest well. Though the first cities rose, and empires spread their influence across continents, the essence of the hunter-gatherer world did not simply vanish. It persisted in pockets, in memories, and most profoundly in the foundational structures of the human mind and the societies that would follow. The transition to agriculture and urban life was a monumental shift, but it was built upon a pre-existing bedrock of social and cognitive abilities honed over millennia in the wild. Consider the human capacity for language and storytelling, the complex grammars and vast vocabularies that allow us to discuss abstract concepts. Past events and future plans were not developed in town squares. They were forged around campfires necessary for coordinating hunts, sharing intricate knowledge of plant lore, and passing down the myths that bound the band together. The first epics, the foundational stories of gods and heroes that would later be written down in Sumer and Egypt, were born in the oral traditions of pre-agricultural peoples, told and retold for generations under the open sky. Our fundamental social instincts also bear the indelible stamp of this long period, the deep-seated human need for belonging. For face-to-face interaction within a community of known individuals is a direct inheritance from life in small bands. The modern concepts of friendship, teamwork, and mutual aid are extensions of the reciprocal altruism that was essential for survival. Even our negative traits, such as tribalism or suspicion of outsiders, can be traced to the adaptive need to protect a small, vulnerable group in a dangerous world. The unit of the band is the original template for human society. Furthermore, the technological ingenuity of the Stone Age laid the groundwork for all future innovation. The principles of mechanics understood by the maker of a spear thrower, the chemical knowledge of the individual who controlled fire and made adhesives from tree sap, the anatomical understanding of the butcher who could dismember a large animal with precision. This was the original stem. The first potter's vessel was a conceptual leap from a hide bag, but the need for containment was ancient. The smelting of metal was a revolution, but it relied on a pre-existing mastery of pyrotechnology, developed over countless generations of heating stone to improve its flaking qualities. Perhaps most importantly, the spiritual worldview of animism and shamanism did not die, it evolved. It became incorporated into the formal religions of early agricultural societies. The fertility goddesses of ancient civilizations often bear a striking resemblance to the Paleolithic Venus figurines. The concept of a dying and reborn god, central to many early religions, echoes the shamanic cycle of journeying to the spirit world and returning. The respect for nature, though often subdued by the imperative to dominate and farm the land, remained a powerful undercurrent, resurfacing in philosophy, art, and our modern environmental consciousness. The hunter-gatherer era was not an age of simplicity waiting to be replaced by complexity. It was an age of a different kind of complexity, one based on depth of ecological knowledge, social cohesion, and spiritual integration with the world. The cities that eventually arose did not erase this legacy. They repurposed it, built upon it, and sometimes struggled under the weight of its contrasting values. The human mind, shaped for mobility and immediate return societies, had to adapt to sedentary life, delayed gratification, and hierarchical power structures. This tension between our deep past and our recent present is a story that continues to unfold within us and within our civilizations to this day. As we truly conclude our journey, we are left to contemplate the sheer scale of this human story. For nearly 200,000 years, Homo sapiens lived as hunters and gatherers. The 12,000 years since the first seeds of agriculture were sown represent less than 10% of our species' history. The age of cities, empires, and industry is but a brief moment at the very end of this long narrative. This perspective is humbling. It teaches us that the world we consider normal, a world of fixed addresses, nation-states, and global supply chains, is a fascinating, brilliant, but incredibly recent experiment. The hunter-gatherer way of life is not an aberration. It is the default setting for humanity. It is the long dawn that preceded the busy day of recorded history. This does not mean we should romanticize the past. Their life was one of real hardship, high infant mortality, and constant physical danger. The comfort and medical advances of the modern world are achievements to be cherished. But neither should we dismiss our deep past as a primitive struggle. It was a successful, adaptive, and deeply meaningful existence that allowed our species to spread across the globe and develop the rich cultures we know today. Their world lives on in us. It is in the joy a child finds in climbing a tree, the deep satisfaction of sharing a meal with close friends, the awe we feel when standing before a wild landscape, and the quiet contentment of creating something with our hands. It is in our love of stories and our need for community. These are not trivialities. They are the enduring echoes of a rhythm that defined us for most of our time on Earth. So as you return from this long exploration of 10,000 BCE, carry with you this expanded sense of time. You are the living bridge between that deep past and an unimaginable future. You possess the ancient heart of a forager, resilient, cooperative, and curious, and the modern mind of a global citizen. The challenges we face today are immense, but the strengths we inherited from those ancient ancestors are deeper still. Their story is one of adaptation and survival against incredible odds. It is our first and greatest story, and it is a part of you. The fire has now burned down to ashes. The story is told. The deep, quiet peace of the ancient world settles over you. Let it carry you into restful sleep, connected to the long, unbroken thread of human experience. Good night. One of the most profound aspects of life before the cities was the nature of communication. It was a world not of announcements and advertisements, but of subtle signs and a silent, continuous dialogue between people and the environment. This dialogue required a quality of attention that is perhaps the greatest legacy we have, in large part, forgotten. For our ancestors, listening was a survival skill. It meant hearing the alarm call of a bird and knowing it signaled a predator or a rival band on the move. It meant distinguishing the rustle of the wind through oak leaves from the sound it made through pine, thereby navigating dense forests on the darkest nights. It meant listening to the stories of the elders, not just for entertainment, but to absorb crucial information about a waterhole that only fills every 10 years, or a type of root that can save a life during famine. This was a world where knowledge was stored, not in books or clouds, but in living memory, passed carefully from one generation to the next through the patient, sacred act of storytelling. This deep listening extended to their inner worlds as well. Without the constant noise of modern life, the mind had space for reflection and keen observation. A hunter would sit for hours in absolute stillness, not just waiting for game, but becoming part of the landscape, his consciousness merging with the rhythms of nature. This state of focused awareness, which we might now call mindfulness or flow, was an ordinary part of daily existence. It was in these quiet moments that innovations were conceived, the idea for a new trap, the memory of a plant that could soothe a burn, the observation of stars shifting with the seasons. Their art, from the magnificent cave paintings to the tiny carved figurines, was a form of deep listening made visible. It was an attempt to capture not just the form of a bison, but its essence, its spirit, its power. By painting it, they were honoring it, understanding it, and perhaps, in a way, communicating with it. The act of creation was a conversation with the world, a way of saying, I see you, I respect you, I understand my place in relation to you. This silent dialogue fostered a profound sense of belonging and responsibility. One did not simply take from the land, one engaged with it. A gatherer would harvest only a portion of the nuts from a tree, leaving plenty for regeneration and for other animals. A band would move on from a campsite before they overhunted the local game or overharvested the local plants. allowing the land to recover. This was sustainability, not as a political concept, but as an innate principle of life, born from the understanding that the health of the group was inextricably linked to the health of the environment. They were not owners of the land, they were participants in it. In our hyper-connected world, this ancient skill of deep, quiet listening is a treasure we can rediscover. It is the feeling of being truly present in a conversation, of noticing the subtle changes in a loved one's face. It is the peace found in turning off the screens and simply watching the clouds, or walking in a forest without a destination. It is the act of creating something with our full attention. This is not a rejection of modernity, but an integration of an ancient strength. It is remembering how to listen to the world, and in doing so, listening to a deep, quiet part of ourselves that has been there all along. As our journey through deep time concludes, we are left with two powerful shapes that symbolize the difference between the world we left behind and the world we have created: the circle and the line. The world of the hunter-gatherer was a world of circles. Life was cyclical, mirroring the patterns of nature. The seasons turned in a circle, from the scarcity of winter to the abundance of summer and back again. The moon waxed and waned in a circle. Migrations followed circular routes, returning to the same rich valleys or coastal estuaries year after year. Their social structures were circular, the band sitting around the fire, each member an integral part of the whole, with leadership flowing to whoever was best suited for the moment. Their worldview was circular, believing in the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. For animals, for people, and for the spirit, time itself was not a straight line rushing toward a destination, but a repeating spiral of familiar patterns, stories, and seasons. The world that began with agriculture and culminated in cities is a world of lines. Fields were plotted in straight lines. Ownership was defined by linear boundaries and walls. Writing, one of the great gifts of civilization, is linear words arranged in lines on a page. History became a linear narrative of progress, of kings and dynasties, one following the other in a sequence. Social structures became hierarchical pyramids and lines of authority, with a chief or a king at the top. Time became a line, an arrow shooting from the past, through the present, and into the future. Neither the circle nor the line is inherently good or bad. Our modern world of lines has given us medicine, literature, and the ability to connect globally. But in embracing the line, we have often forgotten the wisdom of the circle. We see the linear extraction of resources without the circular understanding of renewal. We can feel the linear pressure of time, of deadlines and schedules, and lose the cyclical rhythm of rest and activity, of reflection and action. The story of humanity before the cities is the story of the circle. It is a reminder that we are part of nature's cycles, not separate from them. It reminds us that true community is circular, built on reciprocity and face-to-face connection. It suggests that well-being might be found not in endless linear growth, but in sustainable balance. You carry both the circle and the line within you. The line drives you to achieve, to build, to plan for the future. The circle calls you to connect, to reflect, to care for your community and your planet, and to remember the long, deep past from which you came. So, as you leave this ancient world and return to your own, take a moment to honor both. Value the incredible gifts of your modern, linear world, but also remember the circle. Sit with friends and family and share stories. Spend time in nature and observe its cycles. Listen deeply. Create something with your hands. Feel the sun on your skin and know that this same sun warmed your ancestors 12,000 years ago. The long dawn of humanity is over, but its light remains within us, a gentle, enduring glow. It is the light of community, of storytelling, of reverence for the world, and of resilience. Protect that light, nurture it, and let it guide you. The story is truly complete now. The fire is embers. The night is deep and still. May you rest in the profound peace of that deep history. Sleep well.